No, it doesn't. Now, this basically boils down to two questions. What kind of person are you, and what kind of school do you want to work for? Now, what kind of person are you? You're gonna have to ask yourself, are you flexible? Now, a lot of foreigners struggle with the idea of saving face. Okay, so to give you an example, if you have a student that maybe isn't doing so well at the level he is, and you're not really ready to make him move up a level, and so you sit down with the parents and you say maybe we'll hold him back, make sure he gets a good grasp on the language, and then he can move up a level. That's kind of more of a difficult thing for parents to accept, because they don't want their kid to look bad and they don't want their family to look bad, so they want their kid to move up that level even though they're not ready for it, which is not good for the student, but you're gonna have to go along with it anyway. I find a lot of schools are more concerned with your attitude rather than what you're actually teaching in the class. So you're gonna have to be pretty enthusiastic about teaching. Put on that face and really smile and be happy. And that's not something everyone's ready for, because a lot of people come here to China as more of like a working holiday rather than to actually getting some teaching experience. So it's kind of difficult to sort of not necessarily care about your job, that sounds bad, but to go in every day for hours on end, smiling and dancing and being happy around a bunch of kids that really have no idea what you're saying, that can be really difficult for a lot of foreigners. So a big part of it is making sure that parents feel like they're getting their money's worth, or the students for that matter. Again, it all ties back into saving face. So, you have to ask yourself, do you really care about education, or are you coming here more just to see Chinese culture? High energy, a lot of enthusiasm, really kind of not necessarily giving in to what they want, but making sure that they feel like you really want to be there. Rather than actually having to teach English itself. That kind of comes later. For example, I'm not very good at that. Not that I don't have a lot of enthusiasm, but I care quite a bit if my students are actually learning what they're supposed to be learning. I don't really care how the parents feel. I want to make sure that my students are learning. And in China, that's something I struggle with, because it's all kind of backwards.
Okay, Chairman, can you say horse? Say horse. Come on, Chairman. I know you can do it.
That's okay, Chairman. One more try. Horse. Some schools also might ask you to do things after working hours. For example, going out and do promotional activities, or maybe some Halloween activity or some Christmas activities. You're expected to do that in a lot of schools, and you're not going to get paid for it, at least a lot of the times. The other things that schools sometimes do is send you to other locations to teach. Now, if you don't have personal transportation, that's really difficult for foreigners. For example, I have some friends that work for an ESL center here in Huizhou, and they had to send them to other schools around the city, and the foreigners just said, no, we can't do it. It costs too much money on taxis. They were getting paid the same amount as they were if they just went to the place that they lived by, and it wasn't part of their contract. So that can happen as well. It's something you really need to look for. So the other question that I mentioned earlier is, what kind of school do you want to work for? And there's a lot of different kind of schools that you can work for here in China. There's ESL training centers, kindergartens, universities, even more than that. And they all kind of vary. You also have to keep into consideration what age group do you want to work for. You can work with babies, you can work with 3 and 4-year-olds like preschools, kindergartners, school-age children, high schoolers, university students, and adults. I personally work best with school-age kids, and there's a good reason for that. You see, contrary to popular belief, Chinese parents don't really discipline their kids that much, and we've mentioned that in earlier episodes where you've got kids running around everywhere, not listening to their parents. And so if you're going to work with 3 and 4-year-olds who haven't gone to school yet, they're usually out of control, and it's very difficult to establish any form of discipline in a classroom with a bunch of students that don't speak any English, and you're going to have to rely on your TA or your teacher's assistant to make sure that the kids are doing what they're supposed to. And that's really challenging for foreigners, especially if you can't speak Chinese. I remember one experience where I had a school that sent me to this one class where there were 70 3 and 4-year-olds, and I had one TA, and I had the brilliant idea to give them all musical instruments because I'm an idiot, and I actually left that job fairly quickly. So what ends up happening is a lot of the discipline that students have here falls on teachers. Teachers are very strict with their students. They're very well behaved. They don't, they barely talk. They don't really ask questions. They just sit there and listen to the teacher. So School-age students are very good. They already have the discipline sort of instilled in them. So in China, before they go to school, kids are allowed to do pretty much whatever they want because they're the most important part to a Chinese family. Once they reach school, then things become different and it's a lot easier to work with them. It's also a lot of fun, there's a lot of games that happen, and that's where I feel more comfortable with. I like working with adults too, but I just find myself, because I'm trained to work with kids, that's kind of where my strong suits are. So my advice for you is, if you come to China and you don't like the job that you have, well then go get a different one. Try out different types of schools and figure out what age group works best with you. And some tips I would have is make sure that the school pays on time. I've worked for a lot of schools in China where they pay weeks, even months late, and that's really, hard for teachers here because, well, for obvious reasons financially. And so make sure they pay on time. Also make sure that they don't send you to other locations. That's not always easy. Again, I've been here 4 years, I've worked for a lot of different schools, and I really don't like it when I have to go from one end of the city to the other to go teach lessons. It's good because you get to go see the whole city where, otherwise you might just stay at home and watch Netflix, which again you can't do because Netflix is blocked, but that's besides the point. Just make sure that the school pays on time, and you can also ask to talk to another teacher that's worked there in the past or ones that work there now, and they'll usually be pretty honest with other foreigners because, especially in cities like Huizhou, the foreign community is quite tight-knit, and they're not going to lie to you. Now, of course, every age group has their own challenges, so like I said earlier, I do like working with kids, but if you want to work with, say, university students or high school students, a lot of them are way too shy to actually speak. So if you're asking them a question, chances are they're not going to want to answer you, and again, that ties back to saving face. Because they're because they're taught not to answer questions in class, they're not going to answer a question in your class either. The reason for that being is that if they get a question wrong, then they look bad or they lose face. And so it's really difficult to kind of get an engaging set of students. The other challenge about university, which I taught my first year, is that I had classes of upwards of 100 students, and it's really difficult to make sure that all 100 students are getting the English that you're trying to teach them. It doesn't really work the way that you want. Now, is teaching English the only thing you can do in China? No, not really. However, it is probably the first thing you will be doing. I have some friends here that run bars or YouTube. However, doing these things takes quite a while because you're going to want to learn the language and the culture. So for example, my friends that own bars are dealing with drunk customers on a nightly basis, or the police, or a whole bunch of other nonsense, and I personally don't know how they do it. I would not have the patience. But with YouTube, you can't just really start a YouTube channel and start talking about the culture like you know what you're talking about, because you don't. You just got here. However, you can, I'm sure, start a channel about your experiences, but I'm not sure how successful that will be. For me personally, I have 26,000 subscribers, and I don't make nearly enough money to live off of YouTube. My other friends do, like Winston and Seamilk, but again, that takes a lot of time. So ESL is going to be the thing that you're most likely going to be doing when you first show up in China. Anyways, guys, I hope you liked this quick video. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. If you had different experiences or anything like that, you can also comment those. Check out my Facebook page for updates, and Patreon, of course. And stay positive. I will catch you on the next one. Actually, before I let you go, if you have any sort of ideas for a video or a question you want answered, or maybe like a topic that you want me to go over, let me know and I will do my best to make that video. You have a short time because I will be leaving China really soon. Okay, that's okay. One more chip.